In today's episode, we visit the Blairgowrie Forest Railway and show you how to set up your camera for Lineside photography. Welcome to today's episode. We see that we are almost at 100 subs. Thank you for your support so far. In today's episode, we visit Andrew Johnson's Blairgowrie Forest Railway, an 00 scale garden railway. Then James shows you how to set up your camera settings for the Lineside. Here we go.
I have collected model trains since 1940. My first train set was bought by my parents as a Christmas present while on holiday in Port Elizabeth. 00 or HO scale is a no-brainer. It's easy to find and is the only affordable scale for a South African model train collector or enthusiast. Having nowhere else in the house to build a model railway, it seemed logical, with a large area, to expand. The nicest weather, the garden was chosen. Using 16mm gauge track, I can run a number of scales in the garden from HO, 00, S 3 6 inch gauge, and O gauge 2 foot narrow gauge. I wanted to combine my passions into one by enjoying the garden while seeing the beautiful models pass by. I also vaguely remember visiting and seeing the mini village of Santarama Miniland in Wemapan. I wished to create something like that for myself. The last time I visited Santarama, I was quite disappointed with the condition of the models, but at least the gardens are still maintained. I don't have a single favorite loco, but I do like my Fowler 4F, which has been in my collection for about 20 years. I still have a Lima Blue Train 5E locomotive from the mid-1980s, which I purchased with money I had saved up. The total length of my railway line is 80 yards. Which sounds a lot nicer than saying 73.15 meters. Besides, when you buy Pico track, it is sold in yard lengths.
Railway photographic tips to help you move from automatic to manual, aperture priority or shutter priority. Let's start with metering. For metering, I suggest the following. For Nikon, matrix metering. For Canon, evaluative. For Fujifilm or Sony, you're going to use zone. Your shutter release mode will be the continuous drive mode, where several images are taken. For camera focusing, you're going to use focus tracking. For Nikon, Fujifilm, Sony, that is your AFC or servo continuous, and for Canon, that is your AI servo. When it comes to style and composition, it is all about applying your own. However, when it comes to camera settings and modes, here's what I have used over the years. First and foremost, I feel it is vital that you understand the exposure triangle. For many photographers, you will know this off the back of your hands. However, for beginners, this is an interdependent relationship between aperture, ISO, and shutter speed. By understanding this triangle, taking photographs in any condition can become much easier. So I suggest you familiarize yourself with the exposure triangle. When it comes to railway photography, I use two modes on my camera: shutter priority or aperture priority. My first priority is having a high shutter speed that will freeze the train. A high shutter speed in this situation is 1/250th of a second, but there are exceptions. My second priority is my aperture, or depth of field. More often than not, you will want to include the background in your railway-related shot. It helps me give context to what the train is doing. Is it climbing a hill? Is it rounding a corner? Is it passing through something interesting? It helps to give that depth. That is why in good lighting conditions, I shoot an aperture priority. My aperture ranging from as low as f4 all the way to f11, sometimes higher. In most cases, I can then just adjust the ISO that my shutter speed is greater than 1/250th of a second. Now this can be done in shutter priority as well, but I found it easier in aperture priority. It is all about what works easiest for you. As the conditions get more difficult to shoot in, I move over into shutter priority, leaving my aperture at about f5.6 and adjusting my shutter speed accordingly. In low light, the slowest speed I will shoot at will now come down to about 1/120th of a second, or in really tough condition, 1/60th of a second, with a fairly high ISO. This is without a tripod, of course. Do not be afraid of having a high ISO. Most cameras can go fairly high without the noise being noticeable. However, I recommend finding the highest ISO you can go to with your camera before it becomes too much. For example, on my camera, I have found that I go as high as about ISO 1000 before it gets really noisy. It's also up to you if you want to have an auto ISO. I don't, as I like to be in control of the ISO. For our long exposure session, having a low shutter speed will not be a problem, so long you have a tripod. As a general rule, use a handheld rule to guide you. Thanks for watching this video. Please leave a like and subscribe to our channel.
The platform's clear.
The signals that proceed,
You may depart.